Very happy to welcome everyone to the Plant-pollinator interaction data standard session. Quite exciting. We're going to be handing over to our distinguished chairs, Amber Bixler from FAO and Deborah Drucker from Embrapa. So all over to you.
Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you all for being here. We are very excited about this session. So welcome to this session on our second IGAD virtual meeting today. We have been holding sessions since March 22, and we have other sessions running until April 8th. So all the program is available at that web link. And today, Abram Bixler and I, sorry, Abram, I don't think I got your pronunciation right, but Abram from FAO and myself from Embrapa, we are hosting the session on plant-pollinator interactions data. So the program today, I will, in a couple of minutes, hand it to Abram. He will talk very briefly about the FAO Pollinator Initiative. Then we will have the recording from Teresa from Instituto Tecnológico Vale. She's in fieldwork in the Amazonian region in Brazil. So she shared her presentation in a recording. And I'm not sure if Antonio Saraiva is already here, but he will be able to answer questions about this work as he is a co-author and kindly would be willing to join us today to in place of Teresa. And then we will move to Mo Cassina. Dr. Mo will talk about the pollination initiative in Kenya. After that, we have Laura Becker from IGAD talking about this beekeeper work. That's also very interesting. And then we will move to Diana Cox-Foster from USDA, and she will talk about work that is being conducted on plant and pollination interacting at USDA. Lastly, we have Nacho from Spain talking about this very interesting open and global database on crop pollination. We will keep all the talks on 10 minutes, so we have time to discussion. And we have a very brief question and answer time at the end of all presentations. And after that, we kindly invite you to join us on this WonderMe platform, the Hive, that Abram is going to guide us in the last part of the session. So it's a different kind of interaction, not this traditional question and answer discussion. So we are excited to have you there and make the discussion more live. We will get to know about that more soon. So with that, I will hand it to Abram.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Deborah. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us during this very exciting time. We're very glad that you're here with us. And I'm just starting my screen share now. And very excited about how diverse of a group we have, and glad you're here with us. We're really excited about using the Hive to facilitate networking and engagement in a kind of non-traditional Zoom sense, and I'll share more of that with you. I will keep it very brief, though. I just want to provide an introductory overview of why FAO works on pollinators, and also I'm very pragmatic, so I like sharing tools and resources about pollinators, and maybe you can see some entry points for your work. We work on pollinators because, as I'm sure you're aware, they play an important role in food production and also food security, which for FAO is closely related to our strategic framework. And we are guided by 4 betters. Our strategic framework has better production, better environment, better life, and better nutrition. And from your work on pollinators, from your work, you probably can see how pollinators are important for all 4 of these aspects: environment, livelihoods, nutrition, and more sustainable production. The great thing about bees and pollinators in their diversity is that they provide many different entry points for almost all of the SDGs. And so we work in bees, we work in pollinators, both as not only pollinators and pollination for food production, but also because of the ecosystem services they necessarily provide to the greater landscape and the human livelihoods as well. We've been working on pollinators in harmony with the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, to develop and implement the International Pollinators Initiative 1 and also 2. The first International Pollinators Initiative ran from 2009 until 2015. And at the time, FAO had the support of a global environment facility project, which allowed us to work on pollinators globally. It was particular in 6 different countries, and it allowed FAO to mainstream the agenda inside the organization and develop different tools to raise awareness on pollinators. So that was the first IPI. In 2018, we received the mandate to facilitate the second IPI, and that looks a little different because we've moved beyond some of the first areas of work of IPI 1 into 4 different areas of work, many of which we're mainstreaming through FAO's global work, not only here at headquarters across divisions, but also globally in our country offices and our regional offices in different projects as well. It doesn't look like we will have one particular big overarching project globally, again, funded by Jeff, but we are mainstreaming the agenda through many other different projects and the regional work as well. The new IPI has 4 main elements of work. The first is enabling policies and strategies. And a major focus on this is on pesticide regulations and bringing that to light, enabling really policy level changes for protection of pollinators. The second element is about field level implementation. Pollination and pollinator protection and conservation and sustainable use at various field scales, at landscape, but also at farmer and plot levels. Element 3 is civil society and private sector engagement. And element 4 is monitoring, research, and assessment, which probably this particular session on IGAD fits most at home with. So I would encourage you to take a look at the IPI 2.0 adopted plan of work that you can find on the Convention for Biological Diversity website. Some resources for pollination, protection, and promotion that you might find useful include a whole range of tools that we and other partners have created over the years. Some of these you might find useful, especially for your work in data generation, analysis, database development, etc. One is a protocol to detect and monitor pollinator communities. We've also developed a handbook for participatory socioeconomic evaluation to actually provide some socioeconomic valuation on pollinators. We have agronomic resources as well, such as the next 2, protocol to detect and assess deficits in crops, a rapid assessment of pollinator status, and guidelines for the economic valuation. We have over 6 web pages of resources at our website down there at the bottom. Our website, the Global Action for Pollination, is there. You can see if you just search for FAO and pollinators, it will pop up. We keep a tab on new publications, news, and events. This event is published there. Not only are we showcasing FAO's work, but also partners' work as well. So if you have anything to share about your work in pollinators, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to showcase events, new resources. We also host the UN World Bee Day, and that takes place May 20th. So we do that globally. Another fun thing we've done on the website is we've conducted a stock taking of regional, national, and local pollinator plans and initiatives. So globally, we have those available. So you can take a look and see what pollinator plans of action, what regulations look like concerning pollinators. We have over 20 different resources, like I mentioned, and also we have a crop pollination database. It needs to be updated, and it hopefully will be on its way to being updated here in a little bit, but there is a database for many different crops and their pollination requirements on our website. We also work very closely. So not only do I work in pollination at FAO, but I'm also working in agroecology, which is the design and management of sustainable food systems based on ecological concepts and principles, which interacts very closely with pollinators. And so we have an agroecology knowledge hub that's a treasure trove of good resources and information on pollinators. And we also have developed a tool called TAPE, the Tool for Agroecology Performance Evaluation. And what we're doing is assessing the performance of agroecology in the broad sense. And pollinators have very tangible quantitative measures in TAPE. So you can check that out as well. It's very exciting. We also work on pesticide management, and this ties into pollinator protection. FAO, we have the International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management and also a pesticide registration toolkit, which includes pollinator risk assessment and has a lot of entry points for data collection, database management, and analysis and interpretation. We also have many different practical tools in FAO and also beyond. We work with YUNGA, which is the Youth in United Nations Global Alliance. We have a Pollinators Challenge badge there. We work with Apimondia, which has a very strong scientific and many other different technical committees as well. And if you haven't checked out TICA, it's an FAO platform for sharing really context-specific beekeeping practices globally, and bees have a dedicated page there at TICA. So just that to say, we have a lot moving forward. We're involved in a lot. We'd love to hear from you and hear about your work and what you're doing. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Deborah.
Thank you so much, Abraham. It was a lot of very nice resources, and there are some comments and questions in the chat, but we will leave that to the end. So I would kindly ask Chelsea to share Teresa's recording.
Yes, I'm gonna share my screen right now.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa Cristina Giannini, and I will talk about interaction database on Brazilian crop pollinators and their multiple uses. Our first interaction data standard was developed on 2007. It was based on Darwin Core, and it was published on an event of Instituto Nacional de Biodiversidade in Costa Rica. This first standard contained 4 classes, 2 of them related to interacting species A and B. These 2 classes contained all the taxonomic information that are covered by Darwin Core. Other class was related to the locality where the interaction was observed and contained the usual geographic information also covered by Darwin Core. And a 4th class was the type of interaction. This first standard included all types of interactions. On 2010, I started working with interaction data standard specifically for crop pollination. So I created a 5th class related to the references of published articles where I found information about crop pollination. The interaction species A was related specifically to an animal, and the interacting species B was related specifically to a crop. We divided the type of interaction into two categories. Visit, where there was information that the animal feeds on the flower, but no comments were made on pollination. Or where there was information that the animal damaged the flower or robbed the floral resources. For Pollinate, we retrieved information from each analyzed article about observations related to the behavior of the animal in the flower or about pollination experiment, such as exclusion of pollinators and single visit. As for interacting species A, the animal, we also included some functional traits, mainly for bees species. We included the ITD, that is a traditional measure of body size used for bees, the type of sociality and also the nest, and the distributional range of each species that was calculated using the convex hull of the reported occurrences. As for crops, we included the pollinators' dependency of each crop that we also found in the published articles we analyzed. On 2015, we published our database in two main articles. One of them was related mainly with the interactions that we found between crops and animals, pollinators. And the second one was mainly about the dependence of crops for pollinators and the economic value of pollination services in Brazil. As a summary, we analyzed the 249 references. We found 1,470 interactions, specifically referring to pollinators. This figure excludes visitors. And we analyzed 85 crops and 250 species of pollinators. As related to dependency of crops, we've analyzed 141 crops and found that 85 of them have some degree of dependency on pollinators, and almost a third of them have an essential or high dependency on pollinators. We also found that the economic contribution of pollinators was equivalent to 30% of the total annual agricultural production of dependent crops. In 2017, we published the first assessment of the climate change impact on agriculture using the same database. This is our main result. You can see here the municipalities that probably will face the most severe loss of crop pollinators. Colors varying from yellow to brown corresponds to 0 to 60% of reduction of occurrence probability of crop pollinators. You can see that the south and the east region will potentially be more impacted. These studies also highlighted some knowledge gaps. The first one is the taxonomic impediment of pollinator species, such families of bees such as Alictidae, and also beetles and flies, Coleoptera and Diptera, have the most severe taxonomic impediment. We also showed that some crops have not yet been studied regarding the degree of dependence on animal pollination and the determination of their effective pollinators. We also demonstrated that some regions in the country present scarce data, and that annual production of regional crops is not listed in public databases, especially local and regional data are scarce. On 2015, I moved to municipality of Belém in the state of Pará in the eastern Amazon, and I started to conduct some studies and research in the Amazon forest biome. These new data have been included in the original database. We already published an article about the potential impact of climate change on bees occurring in the Eastern Amazon, and showed that the crop pollinator and occurrence-restricted bees will be potentially more affected. We also determined the value of crop production and pollination services in the Eastern Amazon. And finally, we analyzed almost 200 edible fruit plant species that are used by traditional communities in the Amazon forest, and showed that rely mostly on bees and beetles as pollinators. These plants can be an important alternative to diversification of agricultural crops, especially considering that we showed that most of municipalities of Eastern Amazon rely on a small number of highly dependent crops, and the production will be potentially severely affected by climate change due to the loss of crop pollinators. So these plant species could be an important source to adapt and to mitigate the impact of climate change on food production. Finally, in this current year, 2022, the plant-pollinator interaction data standards that we have started in the 2017 were reviewed and updated and are in the process of publication. I would like to thank my former professors Antônio Mário Saraiva and Vera Lúcia Imperatriz Fonseca, and also my colleague Guaraci Duran Cordeiro for all their supports on these studies. And I also thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and all of you. I know that the recording is not so exciting, but it's great that we could have Teresa's presentation. And for us not to get late in the schedule, I will hand it to Dr. Mu. So Dr. Mu, please let us know if you would like us to share your slides or if you are going to do that.
I will share.
Okay.
Can you see?
Yes, but it's not on presentation mode yet.
Okay. And now?
That looks good.
Thank you. So welcome to my presentation. I'm Mo Kasina from Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization in Kenya. I'll just give a brief or summarized experience of kind of plant-pollinator interaction data that we have been generating or we have been using, and aspects of sharing from Kenya. And my outline of presentation is first a little brief of the plant-pollinator interaction studies, and then the plant-pollinator data sets and the reports that we usually generate from these data sets, and the use of the plant-pollinator interaction reports. And then I talk about the sharing and our finalize. In a very quick way, just want to indicate that Kenya is an African country in the eastern part of Africa. And my organization is the National Agency for Agricultural and Livestock Research, and it covers more or less all parts of the country. So we are just a large organization, and using all of this representation in different parts of the country, it is possible to do long-term monitoring of pollinators. We don't have right now, but this is one of our thoughts, that we can have long-term monitoring that we can use and share with the colleagues from other parts of the world. And the plant pollinator interaction studies in Kenya can largely be grouped into 3 areas. One of the areas is basically the ecological studies that are focused more on understanding the ecosystems. And the main focus on these studies has been plant reproductive successes and aspects of pollinator conservation. Then we have agricultural studies, mainly in croplands, mainly crops, fruits, vegetables, and the focus has been on yield improvement, pollinator utilization, and some aspects of pollinator conservation. We also have basically pollinator studies that look at basically the biology of pollination and biology and ecology of these insects, more or less, and more focus is to understand these pollinators in terms of how they are surviving, their own production or productivity, and aspects of protection. Can't see well, something is hiding my title of the slide, but basically the plant pollinator interaction studies, the data generated is based on the field of the study, whether it is ecological, biological, or agricultural. And the methods of data collection is highly varied, and it is based on the various focus of the study. So you have so many different kind of data sets that are produced differently with the different purposes. For example, this is a ecological data set that one of our colleagues from in Uganda did his PhD studies. Let me just try to move this cursor down here. Yeah, and basically it's more ecological in terms of the kind of observation data being collected. Then if you look at this is similar, it's also an ecological study where Dr. Hagen was looking at the trends of pollinators from farmland, forest towards the forest, cutting across, taking a transect. These are some of kind of data that are generated in such studies. This is a biological study which indeed and looked at effects of deuteramethrin on bees and different bees in Africa, in Europe, and in South America. And it was for decision making on how to improve on pesticide use. This is also a biological study to determine the behavior and how these bees are surviving in the farmlands. And some of the agriculture economic studies and generate data like the economic benefits of pollinators for different crops. And an example also of an experimental study where we look at different parameters that have impact on production. Also interviewing people and getting to know how they understand various pollinators. And some of the reports that we get kind of generated from these data sets include, apart from journal publication, we have review papers, we do documentaries from all of these, we do technical manuscripts, we do brochures, we do policy documents for informing the public. And one of the examples of using the results is one of, this was a very key paper that was presented, and it completely changed opinions of policymakers in the country about pollinators in agricultural land. And now pollinators in Kenya have become a major topic and issue of consideration. Then we also use such findings for capacity building, direct teaching farmers the importance of pollinators and how they can conserve them. In one of the instances where we have used watermelon to compare where you provide pollinators and where you don't provide pollinators, and they can see clearly the difference. Basically, sharing in Kenya, we participate in sharing of various data. We have shared for publication of some of most exciting global papers on the trends of pollinators. And one of the challenge that personally I feel is really constraining our ability to share is these acceptable formats. And most of our researches in the country are mainly for academic, and the data collection is not highly standardized. If the goal for sharing is brought in early enough when we are developing proposals, research concepts, it's possible to see how we can include some of the aspects that are required to collect. So basically my thoughts include understanding. We need to understand fully what kind of data is required and what form, and how should it be shared. These are very important areas for consideration for mainstreaming in our various researches. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to me and for the organizers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mu. It's great to get to know more about your work. And I will move to Laura so we can have time for discussion in the end. Laura, are you going to share your screen?
Yes, one moment. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Laura Becker. I am with the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning team at IGAD, and I coordinate the AI-driven Climate Smart Beekeeping for Women project. And I'm excited to share with you today the Beekeeper's secret, sharing standardized beekeeping data while protecting beekeepers' competitive advantages.
Laura? So we don't see your slides in presentation mode yet. Sorry for disturbing you.
Oh yeah, no problem. Let me change that.
Thank you so much.
Can you see better now?
Thank you. Yes.
Perfect. So I want to show you this apiary of a beekeeper in Uzbekistan. And she is the only beekeeper in her region who produces sunflower honey. And throughout many years of trial and error, she's figured out the exact locations to set up her hives that maximizes the production. And so she doesn't really want to share this information with others because it gives her a competitive advantage to share her unique sunflower honey on the market. But at the same time, you know, she wants to leverage the knowledge collected by beekeepers in her area, but she still wants to keep some of her own data private. So we have this paradox of how do we keep her individual data private, but still leverage the knowledge sharing of the beekeeping community. And this is the paradox that I want to focus on today, is how do we protect the secrets of beekeepers, but then get all of the great benefits of data sharing. So typically a few things that beekeepers do not want others to know include the specific location of their apiary or hive, the timing and location of flowering, and this is really valuable information because it varies from year to year depending on the climate and the season. And finally, some of their specific hive management practices and bee health concerns. But then on the flip side of the coin, we know that sharing this data in some capacity is really helpful to multiple stakeholder groups. Firstly, being other beekeepers. So using that first data point as an example on location, having some sense of this is really important for beekeepers so that they don't overcrowd a single area, because that will reduce the productivity of hives in that area. And then extension services are often, you know, overstretched and under-resourced. So having this information coming in at all times from all beekeepers can help give them a big picture of what's going on in their area so that they can maybe determine where they need to go next to address maybe a certain pest or do an additional training on a hive management practice. And then, of course, us researchers, we love data. And not only is this great to get data on honeybees, but this sort of information can serve as a proxy to other environmental health indicators. And so the tool that we use to support the decision-making of beekeepers, but then also collect this kind of data, is the Localized Beekeepers Companion app. And this is an app that is founded and developed by our partner HiveTracks. And it helps beekeepers track the hive management practices that they do. And then it gives them customized notifications and reminders based on their unique climate, environment, and the beekeeping community around them. And this is the tool that we've used to localize to Ethiopia, Uzbekistan, and Lebanon, and we will be working on piloting it there. And we've had to deal with this question of how do we ensure the privacy of beekeeper data, but then help it benefit the broader community. And so I want to show you the ways in which we do that. The first is through aggregation. So when we share data, we never share a singular data point from a singular beekeeper. We always aggregate it so that it is appearing for multiple beekeepers across a whole region. Secondly, of course, we never share any identifying information of individual beekeepers, so never sharing their name or precise location. And then we also standardize all of the inputs that beekeepers provide. And I'll give it a few examples on the next slide of how exactly we do that. And I also wanted to mention this Apimondia bee data standardization group, which HiveTracks founded. And they're really focusing on all of these questions and coming up with solutions. So one of those solutions is this BXML data standard. And so we try to follow the best practices coming out of that in our project and hope it will enable greater data exchange for similar projects in the future. And so getting back to this question of data standardization, essentially what we do is we collect the same types of information for all of our beekeepers, regardless of their country, but we localize the responses that they can provide based on their context. but then we also enable them to write their own notes and set up their own tasks and reminders within the app. And so using the example of Ethiopia, there, as with all countries, we collect information on hive types, but they have a unique type of hive that is a traditional hive that does not allow internal inspections. So they have the option to select that hive, which then customizes their experience in the app because the management is so different since they can't do that internal inspection. Also, another localized component example is the bee eater bird. So this is a pest that they have at their hives there, and also some of our beekeepers in Uzbekistan face. And then finally, they can report on their local flowers that are blooming, such as the Veronia flower. And I've talked a little bit about the logistics and the practical ways in which we process and deal with this data, but we always have to remember that there is a human aspect. In order to get accurate data from beekeepers, they need to trust us. They need to understand that we won't share their personal individual information. And then they also need an incentive. You know, they should have a reason to give us this data. And to do so, we share back with them the data that we collect. And this is kind of how we do that. So they'll get back notifications that look something like this. So 37 beekeepers treated for Varroa. And this tells me as a beekeeper, okay, I should maybe go inspect my hives in case this is already an issue, or I should prepare to ensure that I have the equipment and supplies I need should this issue arrive at my hives. But I don't know the exact location or any problems, specifically which beekeepers reported this pest. I can also know what is blooming in my area. So in this example, it is sourwood. So maybe I already know of a location of sourwood trees where I want to relocate one of my hives. Or, this information can help notify me of what might be happening next. So I might know that after sourwood blooms, the next plant to bloom is sunflower. So I need to prepare for that. And then finally, I will get hive management action reminders. So here I'm seeing that other beekeepers are winterizing their hives, and I'm a new beekeeper and I don't know everything that I have to do to winterize my hives. So it's good to know that it is the time to do that and to seek out more information on how to do so. And then from the research and extension perspective, I'm looking at a map that is showing me the location of apiaries, but it rounds it to the nearest 3 kilometers. So I can't see exactly where the hives are, the apiaries are, but it's still really helpful so that I can understand, maybe in the north of my country, we're seeing a lot of this pest reported, so I have to see what's going on. Or in another part of the country, the beekeepers aren't inspecting their hives at the frequency that we would recommend. So I should do some follow-up training there. And then this feature is in process, it's being developed, and we're hoping that it will also enable us to send notifications back to the beekeepers within those select groups. And so to summarize, indeed, beekeepers' data can be shared back to them without revealing their secrets, and it can have a great benefit to extension workers and research communities. So we would love to get connected with you. Feel free to reach out in the chat, and otherwise looking forward to the Q&A session. And feel free to follow us on any of these channels to learn a bit more about our project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to see the variety of challenges that we face when we talk about pollination, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So let's move on to Diana, who is going to talk about the work being conducted in USDA. So please, Diana, let us know if you'd like to share your screen or if you would like us to do. Okay. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for attending today. And I'd like to tell you about interactions and activities that we're having here in the United States with the Department of Agriculture. My co-authors on the talk are Christine Taliga, who's a plant ecologist with the National Plant Data team, and Elizabeth Hill, who's the USDA Honeybee and Pollinator Research Coordinator out of the Office of the Chief Scientist. And okay. So United States Department of Agriculture has a mission in which it is to promote all activities associated with food, agriculture, natural resources, and others. And a critical part of this is to preserve our nation's natural resources through conservation, restored forests, improved watersheds, and healthy private working lands. And over the years, we have now recognized that healthy pollinators are critical, essential for the productivity of our agricultural and natural ecosystems. And Congress mandated in 2018, creating a position for coordination of pollinator activities. And we have devised strategic pollinator research activities and priorities. And amongst one of these is to begin to assemble data more broadly on pollinator and plant associations. Our challenge in North America is that we have over 4,000 species of bees and many other pollinators. We also have over 38,000 plant species found in agriculture and natural ecosystems. So how can we begin to understand the interactions of the pollinators with the plant species? We have two major databases that we're beginning to pull together to begin to look at this. One of the databases is associated with the U.S. National Pollinating Insect Collection, which is under my direction. It's one of the largest bee collections, and our data for the individual specimens include plant associations. The other database is the plants database, and this has standardized information about vascular plants, mosses, liverworts, hornworts, and lichens. And it's one of the most widely utilized websites within the federal government here. Both of these databases use Darwin Core standards. And so we're able to pull these two together. A little bit more data on the U.S. National Pollinating Insect Collection and its associated database. The collection has over 1.8 million specimens, has worldwide coverage, but there is a focus on the United States, and in particular, southwestern or western United States. The database has over 800,000 records. And in this database, it gives much of the information that is collected as the bees are taken from the field. But it also has in there the plant associations on which the bees were netted from. There's other data that goes into with each of these unique specimen numbers here. We have genomic data. This includes sequences for genomes, ultra-conserved elements, barcodes, and macrosatellite data. These data would be critical for learning about population genetics, health of the populations. We also have high density images that are XYZ composite images, like the one on the far left, that allow you to zoom in and look at particular characters that are important for taxonomic identification. We also have pollen slides and publications linked to each of these. We're currently moving to make this database more publicly accessible for the public data that can be shared, and also to create software that allow us to capture this collection data in the field more easily to create the labels. The plants database is with the Natural Resource and Conservation Service. And this has in it the standardized information for individual species, and giving the characteristics, the common names, the scientific names, and the taxonomy. It also shows the state and county level distribution for the vascular plants, their morphology, physiology, growth habit, and their legal status. In addition, it shows their distribution and whether or not they are native to an area. This is all based on vetted and verified distribution information and the current taxonomic status. And the website's shown here, and encourage you to visit it. It's currently undergoing a modernization. And for this, there will be a tab added to the database that will indicate pollinator visitor. And this will not only include bees, but also flies, moths, and butterflies. It'll have the state level distribution for these pollinator visitor interactions. And the data that will be shown there will be based on verified distribution information, such as that coming from the National Pollinating Insect Collection, other databases, and peer-reviewed journals. We're also moving forward to add in the characteristics tab, the nutritional composition of pollen. And this will be based upon pollen taken from an individual plant species directly. The pollen will be analyzed for lipids, proteins, and fatty acids, amino acids using standardized methods. And the reason to show this data is to help beekeepers and others begin to understand what nutritional advantages the pollen offers to the bees and other pollinators visiting. It's also, this database is being optimized for web services and search engines. We're not only integrating these two databases, but we're also pulling these databases over into climate databases and models that are there. Both databases have GIS data for the plants and the bees, and we're hoping to track the changes of both the bees and the plants over time, especially with climate change, and looking at bloom time phenology. The goal for this is the early detection of changes will assist USDA in preventing declines in the plant reproduction and also in pollinator forage. For our bees within the United States, we have limited information on the population status and ranges for majority of the 4,000 endemic native bees. And it gives us a need to create native bee monitoring. And the federal government cannot do it alone, so we are creating partnerships with non-federal entities and across the federal government. Within the federal government, we have created a federal native bee monitoring task force. This includes multiple federal agencies across many departments, a major effort in the United States right now. We've also have a funded U.S. National Native Bee Monitoring Research Coordination Network that includes universities, non-governmental organizations, and federal government. Has 5 aims, as you can see here, and a major one of those is gathering and cataloging data that are standardized, accessible, and sustainable. And hopefully this will enable us to keep moving forward across time here. So in summary, our efforts we hope will yield a rich repository of data for plant pollinator interactions, their benefits, and the climatic impacts on bee and pollinator species, with the ultimate goal to ensure protection of rich, diverse, and flourishing habitats in both agricultural and natural ecosystems. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and thank you to our collaborators and many of these people. Cindy is in attendance today, so thank you.
So thank you so much, Diana. It's great to learn more about your efforts in USDA. And we're going to have Nacho now talking about the crop poll database, and hopefully we can explore more all the presentations in the discussion.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Good.
Great.
Thank you very much for showing all this. Let me stop here. For showing all these interesting data products and databases. I'm talking from a researcher perspective. I'm working at CSIC in Seville, Spain. And we've been working in a crop pollination database focusing on crop yield and pollinators. As a brief introduction, we work a lot on the negative aspects of agriculture on biodiversity. So agriculture is still one of the main threats to biodiversity, but paradoxically, biodiversity is also an important piece for agriculture, mainly in terms of ecosystem services provided. So this paradox is very interesting for us, and understanding this loop and how we can maximize the protection of biodiversity in agriculture and the benefits of biodiversity for agriculture was very important for us. Moreover, the area that agricultural fields occupy is really huge. So it brings a lot of opportunities to understand how biodiversity can coexist with productive landscapes. We found many species within the crops, but also in the natural areas that are nearby, and they form these complex networks. And indeed, mainly in research, which is what I know better, we've been collecting data for years. And one of the most studied groups is pollinators. In this forum, you already know how important they are. A lot of vegetables and fruits depend on pollinators for reproduction. And as I said, we've been gathering a lot of data on that. We've been gathering data on how pollinators respond to different cropping systems, on how dependent are different cropping systems to pollinators, but all this data is scattered in different places and in different formats, which make it very hard to use. So we realized that we could make an effort to gather all this data, and we realized also that some of this scientific data has some commonalities that can help us to organize them. So the data we were gathering mainly, it's like where this is happening, like the locality, the coordinates of the fields, which fields are you studying? When, this is also very important, both in terms of temporal and which year are we talking about, if we want to interested in temporal trends, but also in which month are these things being recorded. Who are you recording? Which is mainly which crops, but also we pay attention to which varieties, which is very important when we want to predict the effects of pollinators on different crops. The variety, it's a key piece of information. And which pollinators, which groups of pollinators, bees, hoverflies, butterflies, even beetles. And we can disentangle the effect of the different guilds of pollinators on the different crops. We also have information a lot of times on the context, like which management it's been doing. It's organic management, it's conventional, it's being treated or not with pesticides, and the sampling methods, which most of the times are comparable to some degree, but getting this information is also very important. And for me, a key piece of the database is that a lot of the data sets also contain information on yield. Sometimes it's fruit set, sometimes it's seed weight or kilos per hectare, but we have some measure of the yield on this side. So overall, we've been collecting data that describe which pollinators are in which crops and which is the yield of that crop. And our question is, can we gather together all this data and unify it? Of course, this data is important it's accompanied by a good metadata using standards. As you said, the Darwin Core is one of the key standards, and also give credit to the contributors also to stimulate the data sharing. So we gather more than 180 authors. That was a massive work to put together all these data sets. And we got information on more than 200 study systems and more than 4,000 fields with data across the world. I will briefly explain a bit how we did that. Basically, we contacted the individual researchers, either from our contact network or from the papers that were published. We asked for the data, which was preserved in raw material. And then we went to several quality checks, including species names, both of crops and the pollinators, that the units were clear, and we clean them as much as possible. Then we get authors checking on the cleaning data, like saying, okay, my data has no errors. If any further iteration was needed, was done. And then we automated the integration of all this data, which is now published and open to everyone. The idea is that if more people has this kind of data and it's interested in contributing, they can just provide the new data, use the templates available, and it will be automatically integrated into the database and published with a versioning number. So we have version 1.0 with initial data set, but this will grow, and we hope it would be a useful resource in the future. So far, as I said, we have more than 4,000 fields with data on which crop and which pollinators were, and most of them with also with yield data. And you can see here an overview of how those are distributed. So some crops are more widespread in their database. So for example, apples, rapeseed, coffee, we have more than 14 studies containing information on those crops, while others are just represented by one study, like melons or cucumbers. And you can see we cover a wide variety of crops, from crops in the upper part, which are produced in a lot of quantity around the world. This is FAO data, by the way, in terms of production, but also crops with a low production, at least at the world scale. Of course, having this kind of studies implies that we have some biases, and it's important to acknowledge those. For example, most of the studies come from the United States, also quite a lot from South America and Europe, but countries in Asia and Africa are underrepresented, although we have at least 4 or 5 data sets for each continent. With this data set, the important thing for me is that you can ask very different questions and can be used for answering questions that we even didn't thought of. For example, one can see which is the contribution of different pollinator guilds in different areas. You can see that sylphid flies and other wild bees in purple are quite common. We can also see the prevalent role of honeybees in most of the areas. And another striking result is how the northern hemisphere has a big share of pollinators that are bumblebees, because it's where they occur in the distribution. So one can ask questions about, for example, the pollinators, but one can also ask questions about the effect of these pollinators on yield, or you can combine that with other databases, like, for example, land use change or climate change, and ask questions about how these drivers are affecting the pollinators. Also, it's nice to see that we have a nice temporal coverage, especially for Americas and Europe. We have almost 30 years of data, but other regions, of course, are more scattered, and data is, as you can see, is quite recent overall. And basically, this was what I was willing to share with you, that this is already published. It's published in Ecology as a data paper. It's open, you can already download it and use it. And we hope that we can keep growing this database and using it to answer different scientific questions. But I would also love to see this database being used for other things that we didn't thought of, for managers or from policymakers. And I'm sure it will have different uses. And of course, this was the effort of a lot of people. So thank you very much to all of the contributors, especially the Biodiversa, which funded the initial database. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Nacho. It was great, a great overview, and it's a great, very nice effort on this database. I will move very, very quickly to the last set of slides here, which I will talk about the World Fair project. It was, let me know if you're seeing my screen all right, if you please. So this project, and the World Fair project is a global cooperation on fair data policy and practice, and we have a case study on pollination data. So it's funded by the European Commission. It's a global consortium with 11 case studies in different research fields. So it's focused on the FAIR principles, which I believe many of you already are familiar with. And we are just starting. The project was submitted in September, and it's going to start in June. So we consider this a pre-activity already of the project. It's focused on data standards adoption, and it's not a research project. It's focused on adoption. And as I said, one of the case studies is on pollination data, and IGAD, which is the convener of this session here, and I have the pleasure of being one of the co-chairs, or together with Cindy Parr and Ima Sabrets and Valeria Pes. We coordinate this specific case study, and it's important to mention that GBIF is coordinated another case study. So it was mentioned here about the TEDWIC and Darwin Core. So there is also a link with that. And in this case study on plant pollination data, we have many partners already. Many of you are here today. And the main challenge is to ensure fairness. So it's quite a big challenge, because with so many different disciplines in the project, there will be some core that can be recognized for agnostic point of view to data, but there are specificities, and we touched already on many of them in the talk during the talks today. So we want to ensure this broad participation. So that's why we already considered this session today a pre-activity, because we really need to connect these different initiatives. And one of the tasks within the project is the discovery phase. So I believe we can already say that this is already a discovery phase. We also have this TEDWIC Biological Interaction Data Interest Group. So I see Jose here and Jorit and other colleagues that are already interacting in this group. So you are very welcome to join us in our discussions there. And also I would invite you to be part of our email group, this D group, to stay connected with the next steps of the project. And just to finish my very brief overview, I would love to have more time to talk about IGAD, but I would invite you to join this Research Data Alliance, the community of practice. We are the first community of practice of the Research Data Alliance. And I would like to thank you all very much for your attention. And also I need to mention and thank all the IGAD co-chairs. Please visit our community of practice website if you're interested. And we are also having other sessions until the 8th of April on other topics related to agricultural data. And also regarding the plant pollination project, the work package within the World Fair project, we will be also updating about our efforts there. So let's stop here. So thank you very much. And with that, I would like